Well, you're going to hear me for the last time say these words. So, welcome to the 11th annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment virtual conference presented by Northeastern State University. Today's session is the last one that we had since the beginning of last week. You probably know I'm Bob Ailes. I'm your moderator for the session. And of course, I mentioned we have the talented Michelle doing the captioning for us. And to view her handiwork, simply click on the closed caption icon on the toolbar at the bottom of the screen. As you can see, we have a really interesting topic, creating highly effective classroom environments. And that seems to always be a challenge. So we're fortunate to have Molly Brennan with us from the University of Michigan Flint. And Molly, I'm going to let you take it over.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'd like this to be an interactive session, so feel free to not just type in any questions or comments, but you're also welcome to, come in with audio as well during the time. How I was going to start off was just a quick kind of overview of the session. I'm going to get to my objectives here, if my computer will go down to the next screen. There it is. Hopefully you can see this. This is kind of how it feels to me sometimes. Being a teacher is easy. It's like riding a bike, except the bike's on fire, you're on fire, everything's on fire, and you're in hell. So over my past 20 years of teaching, I have certainly come to realize that's the different challenges that can certainly be involved with teaching. And I'm still learning and continue to learn as I go through my teaching courses, both online and within the classroom. I've been teaching long enough that I've done a lot in the classroom. And while some of the things that we'll be talking about today are certainly going to be applicable to online, a lot of it is also very applicable to face-to-face classrooms. Okay, so these are some of the session outcomes. Oops, I did something to my screen. I'm sorry about that. Hey, Bob, can you help me out? I seem to have lost my screen here. Oh, there we go. Okay. So the session outcomes, participants will be able to utilize 3 new strategies to create more effective learning environments. We'll be able to better engage students that have historically not been active in the classroom. And I do have some handouts that I'm happy to share with people, specifically about engaging students that don't historically participate. We all have had those in our classrooms for sure. And then also how to help better prepare students to come to class actually prepared, where they've actually done the reading, done the assignments that they're supposed to, so that you can jump right into the course content. Okay. So just a little bit about me. What I'm going to do is kind of give a background of some of my teaching strategies and things that I've learned over the years. Talk a little bit about that, and then I'm going to turn it over to kind of all of us to start talking about and sharing ideas about some of the challenges in our classrooms and possible solutions or things that we can do to alleviate some of those challenges. I certainly don't have all the answers. I'm certainly not an expert. So I thought that, by all of us sharing some ideas and challenges that we've had to deal with over the years, that would be really helpful for all of us to kind of use that as a stepping stone in learning how to create more effective learning environments. So I've been teaching for about 20 years in one capacity or another, not just at colleges or universities, But actually my first job was with, my first job out of graduate school was with the American Lung Association. And they have a program called Freedom from Smoking that really kind of catapulted me into training and facilitating and really got me to love that arena. It was a day-and-a-half training that I would do for other providers in healthcare who were going to be going back to their agencies, their organizations, hospitals, wherever, to talk about tobacco cessation and hold groups for tobacco cessation. So this was a training program that I would usually have anywhere between 20 and 30 participants for a day and a half. And so being thrown into a situation like that, where you're spending so much time with people, I certainly learned not to stand up there and just lecture, but to actually do kind of a flipped classroom and to get participants involved and actually doing what they were going to be doing within their settings. So I found, just from my experience, that students generally like to do hands-on kind of activities, and I've found that that's been very valuable within the classroom. As I mentioned, I'm still learning and certainly picking up things as I continue to teach. I'm always open to hearing feedback from my students, and hopefully I create a welcoming classroom environment for them to be able to do that. I also teach, obviously, at the University of Michigan Flint. I've taught at the University of New England, Oakland University. I've taught at community colleges. So I have kind of a wide variety of teaching experiences. What I do want to talk about was the most challenging classroom that I had, which was actually affiliated with the work that I did with the American Lung Association. When I was training people on how to facilitate tobacco cessation programs, one of the individuals that came to one of my trainings worked at a forensic psychiatric hospital. These were individuals that were also incarcerated. They were found to be mentally incompetent, or they had mental illnesses. Many of them had schizophrenia. And as I'm sure some of you know, people with schizophrenia have like a 90% rate of tobacco use. And so she asked me if I would be willing to come in and talk to a group of people that were in this situation. Many of them were there for the rest of their lifetime because they had done violent crimes. And so I decided that I would. This was certainly an atypical classroom that I was accustomed to, but I figured if I could speak to this group, that I would pretty much be okay and feel pretty comfortable within most classroom environments. And so I did go to the hospital, psychiatric facility / prison, and spoke to about 15 individuals that were genuinely interested in not using tobacco anymore. There was as many guards, prison guards, in the room as I was presenting as there were prisoners. I had to go through multiple locked doors. I had to get frisked. It was quite an ordeal. However, I felt as though the session with them was successful. They were very interactive. They were very interested in learning how not to use tobacco and make that transition. They had a lot of good questions. And so I came away from that feeling as though I could probably teach within most classrooms. But we all have challenging classrooms, hopefully not as maybe intimidating as this one is or was, but that is something that as we go through this session, I really would like you to think more and more about some of the biggest challenges that you've had within your classrooms. Okay, so this is something that I do. I'm just going to share a few things that I do within my classes that I found are very helpful. And this is one of the things that I have them do generally the first day in class. I have them partner up with somebody that they don't know. And I really underscore that because I don't want them partnering up with somebody that they already know and they're already comfortable with. One of the things that I really try to focus on within the classroom is to really form a sense of cohesion, a sense of community within the classroom, because that's going to build trust within the classroom. That's going to increase people's comfort level and make it easier for people to participate and be really active in their own learning experience. So I usually ask them to share what their name is, their field of study, hobbies, interests, and something unique about their first or last name. Now, the catch to this is they have to pair up with somebody that they don't know. And secondly, then they are going to be introducing their partner back to the rest of the class. So they really have to pay attention to the answers that they are getting from their partner and the discussion they have. And I find that this has been very useful because it makes people feel a little bit more comfortable. They get to know somebody one-on-one as opposed to a group setting. And so I have found that this has been really useful. One thing I really want to underscore, and what I have learned over the years, I certainly didn't always know this when I was teaching, the first class, the first 20 minutes of that class is really important. It really can set the tone for the rest of the class. So it's very important, I have found, to create what students consider a safe environment. And this really helps to build trust, which is something you have to do, I feel, immediately, so that students, especially those that might not usually participate, feel comfortable doing that, feel that it's okay and that their opinions are valued as they go, as they start to interact with their classmates. And so as I said before, I pair up the students and have them answer different questions for each other. I also sometimes will do another kind of icebreaker called 2 Truths and a Fib, where the student tells the rest of the class 2 truths about themselves and 1 thing that isn't true, and then the class has to kind of guess which one is not true. And that also leads to people finding out more about each other. You know, a lot of times people share that they've traveled, or you know, that they come from a large family, and you can start conversations also from that sort of an icebreaker. I know that people don't generally like doing icebreakers, but I really feel like a lot of times they set that tone. So kind of just as we were talking about in our session outcomes, the same thing is true for the syllabus. I review, and I'm sure most of you do, review your syllabus the very first day of class. And I've changed my syllabus over the years. I've tried to make my syllabus more positive. And I usually try to set up the tone that it's going to be an interactive classroom. So I actually put in my syllabus, participation in class is essential. I'm very interested in hearing your thoughts and opinions. Your point of view matters. Please share your thoughts in class. And the other thing that I do is, on the very first day of class, I ask them what they want to get out of the class. What's important for them to know? What skills do they want to learn? What do they want to walk away with? And on that note, I also try to make any of the class course materials that we cover relative and relevant to what they're going to be doing in their careers. You always hear students like, well, I don't really understand the point of this. Like, how is this going to help me out? Well, we always try to bring it back to, okay, this is what we learned today. What does this mean to you? How can you take this as you go forward in your career, and how can you utilize this? So I feel that making it relevant to them is also very important. Okay. This is one of my PowerPoint slides that I use every class. What do you want to learn from this course? And you'd be amazed at how many students are just absolutely shocked that you're asking them what they want to get out of this course. And a lot of times it's stuff that's already in the syllabus that's being covered. Once in a while, there are certain areas that they want to focus more on. And I have enough flexibility in my courses that I can certainly do that. Okay. So again, I just want to reiterate that setting the stage is so important within the class. I will talk with them about the classroom environment and basically lay down the fact that I really want to hear what they think, what their opinions and thoughts are, and that that's important to me, that we're going to learn from each other, and that they feel, I want them to feel as though it's a safe environment. And they might have opinions or thoughts that aren't popular, or most of their other classmates might not agree with, and that's okay. I ask them to be respectful of each other and to keep an open mind. And then finally, I ask them how they learn the best. What makes it the easiest for them to learn? Do they like to learn by doing activities, small group activities, larger group? Do they like self-reflection? Are they better with like documentaries or videos? Do they find those helpful? Ask them how they learn the best, because a lot of times you can tailor your classes around what's going to help them to maintain and really take in that information. One thing I also stress is that even though you're the professor, you might not agree with their opinion, they won't be marked down or thought less of. I can't tell you how many times I've had students come up to me and say, I always try to say kind of what I think the professor wants to hear, but this classroom has made it safe enough for me to say something different, something that I feel, something that is my opinion that you might not agree with, but I want them to feel okay doing that. I don't want them to feel like all they have to do is kind of reiterate what I say. I also focus on the fact that this is not an adversarial relationship. It's not me against them, that I want them to be successful, and I'm here to help them to be successful, and I want them to do well. And what's going to make that easiest for them? How can I facilitate that? And again, focusing on the do's and trying not to overly stress the don'ts, although that inevitably does come up, but I try to maintain a positive framework. The other thing I really try to talk about is for other educators, and this is something that has come from my public health background, knowing your audience as best you can. And this is true in the classroom too. I've dealt with very different classrooms, a variety of people, diverse people, older, younger, over the years. And who your audience is going to really depend on how you communicate with them. Finding out what's important to them, what motivates them, what do you need to consider as you go into your classroom. And that can include, and this certainly isn't an exhaustive list, demographics, behavior, culture, attitude, family background, language. And again, that's not an exhaustive list, but those are things that you want to think about as you go through teaching your class and getting to know your class better. So this is an example I use, and this is from my public health background. And actually, if people could share what they think about this, how would you approach this particular group, these teenagers, to stop smoking? And I'm trying to open up the box where I could see chat. How would you guys, if you had to, how would you speak to this group about stopping tobacco use? Anybody, and you can do it audio or you can do it in the chat box, whichever's easiest. Fire extinguisher. Yeah, getting someone to tell their story. Yes, absolutely. If you can get somebody in there to tell their story, with this particular group, you would want to get a younger individual in there to tell their story. Maybe a younger individual, who has had issues, health issues or something like that. Yeah, asking them why they smoke. The one thing that I can tell you with this particular group is that they don't care that they're going to get cancer when they're 65. These are young teenagers. They're going to live forever and they can quit anytime they want to. So things that are important to this particular group are peer pressure. Right, exactly. Margie Vance just said they're so impressionable, they want to fit in with their peers. And money. Cigarettes a pack of cigs costs $7-8 depending on what state you live in now. And even if you were just a pack-a-day smoker, that's what, $50-60 a week. Have them add that up. That's $2,500 $3,000 a year. That's a lot of money for a teenager. That's a lot of money for me. So you have to really try to gauge what's important to them. Again, they don't care that they're going to get cancer when they're 70. Vaping is also, I also use that. I used to say tobacco, and sometimes I just add in there vaping as well, because that has become so popular. Exactly. How much money can you save? How do you do can you do sports as well when you're smoking? Obviously not. So again, just kind of figuring out, yes, what their point of view is, absolutely. And then, okay, so here's the same thing. How would you approach this person to stop smoking? How would you approach her? And I am trying to make a point here. I'm just talking about, tobacco because that's my area of expertise. Too little, too late. What do you think is important to this woman? What would you think matters to this woman? Because I have had people, that are older. Yep, her grandchildren, bingo. You have to figure out what do you think might be important to this person, and it would be her grandchildren, maybe even her children. Does she want to live long enough to be able to spend time with her grandchildren? And what's her quality of life going to look like if she continues to smoke? And as Julie was saying, it's not too late. As soon as you stop smoking, the body starts healing itself immediately. So even though she might be older, we could certainly speak to her grandchildren, her family, and the fact that it's not too late if she did stop smoking, that she can start her body healing immediately. And this is the last example, and this gets a little bit to culture. How about this gentleman? How would you approach this gentleman if you wanted to get him to stop smoking? One of the things culturally with Native Americans is that tobacco is seen as sacred. It is seen as, when they use that in the peace pipe, tobacco is seen as the messenger to the gods, so to speak, because it floats up into the air, into the heavens. And so within the Native American culture, the traditional Native American culture, it's seen as sacred. So keeping that in mind, what are some things that you might what strategies could you use to talk with this person? Native American culture is also very focused on nature, on viewing the body as a sacred piece, sacred, looking at the body as a temple. So, again, my point is just, you have to know your audience. Approaching these 3 different people about tobacco is going to be completely different because they're all very different from one another. So my point is just trying to get to know your audience, who you're talking to, what's going to motivate them, what's going to make them want to learn more or make changes or increase their knowledge base. Showing humility, I think, is always a good thing. I like this quote, "On the highest throne in the world, we still sit only on our own bottom." Sharing a personal story, using humor when things don't go as planned. You can sometimes use that opportunity to show your flexibility and that mistakes do happen, that you're not this perfect person that has all the answers to everything. So showing some humility kind of humanizes you a lot of times to your students as well, and that can be really helpful. So this is kind of where I wanted to stop talking about some of the things that I do within the classroom that I have found that have been helpful. And I really wanted to see what you think are some of the biggest challenges in the classroom for you and maybe have some discussion about that. So with that in mind, if you can just take a minute or two to think about that and then either come in through audio to share that information or write it down in Messenger, that would be really helpful. All right, so we've got one is active listening. And I'm going to kind of write these down too as you list them out because I want us to be able to talk about some of these as a group and kind of collectively maybe problem solve or come up with some solutions. Getting students to stop worrying about points, students preparing for class. Okay. Yeah, unprepared. That's a big one. That always comes up. Fear of failure. Okay. It is a challenge to take them out of their comfort zones. And I think it certainly isn't a catch-all, but I think that a lot of the things that you guys are talking about, and I certainly don't have the answers completely for every one of these, but a lot of these will at least be somewhat alleviated by, like I said, setting that stage in your first class and setting up an environment where the students feel safe and where they feel that their opinions and viewpoints are going to be valued and that they are going to be supported not just by me, but by their classmates too. And that's one of the reasons I say this is not an adversarial relationship. I am here to help you be successful. You have to do your part. There's, no two ways about that. But I am here to help facilitate that and to be kind of a coach for you in terms of what you need to get done. Willing to take risks. I feel like if there's trust that's built in the environment, that students will feel more willing to take risks. Sometimes also if teachers, professors share personal stories, and that's really obviously up to you whether or not you want to do that, but sometimes sharing a personal story about maybe a hardship or something, with your family that's been challenging can also make students feel a little bit more willing to open up and take risks. So let's take one of these on right now. So how about for students coming prepared to class? There's a handout that I think Bob said he put onto the website that I provided that has some bullet points and talks about how some strategies to get your students to come prepared to class. But I'm also really interested in hearing any ideas that you guys might have. So if anybody wants to share some ideas that they've used that they felt have been helpful for getting students prepared to come to class, that would be great. One of the bullet points that I like on this sheet is, and I don't know if you have it with you or not, but the third bullet point down is inviting students to brainstorm how to make coming prepared compatible with their current priorities, needs, values. such as their goals for the course. So ask them, get ideas from them. What's going to help you ensure that you come to the class prepared? And I think this also builds in some ownership around that too. So I definitely like that idea, but I'd really like to hear if anybody else has ideas as well. And Kim shared that she feels like a lot of growth happens with peer revisions and revisiting assignments. I'd be really interested in seeing if you're willing to share your handout called Writing Crimes. I'd love to see that if you're willing to share it with us. Are there other ideas too in terms of getting your students prepared to come to class so that they're ready to kind of hit the ground running? Of course, the other thing is to let them know about any out-of-class preparation support systems or resources that are there on campus or even online and how to use them. Sometimes that's helpful. So Cody says, sharing strategies I used during grad school to prioritize readings. That's really helpful. And again, that kind of just humanizes you. That you also had to do this, and so kind of what they're dealing with. Yeah, suggesting peer work groups or study groups I think is really helpful in a lot of my classes, even though they don't like it at first. I do have them do small group work a lot, small group projects. And then many of them come to me later on and say, I didn't want to do it at first, but we had such good group cohesion that we ended up studying together and discussing issues together. And so again, building in that sense of community, I think can be really helpful. I think possibly another idea is really just focusing on what's in it for them. What's in it for me kind of mentality, making it relevant to them. How are they going to be able to use this information? And utilizing technologies that are relevant to them too, especially if you have a younger class, using social media in some capacity, using Twitter in some capacity. There's different ways to incorporate kind of what they use on a daily basis into your teaching. So I think building buy-in can be really helpful. And Julie was saying too, the positive feedback to students that are prepared. Again, you're just kind of setting up that role model, like, okay, well, if this person's getting all that positive feedback because I came in prepared, maybe I should do a better job of that. And I also like what Stacy shared, a relevant current event and discussing that and bringing it to class. So that's a great idea. Right now, I teach public health and healthcare administration, and the coronavirus is huge right now. So we've been talking about that in a lot of my classes. Relevant, current, and unfortunately might end up impacting the United States. It's certainly impacting the global economy. So we talk about it from differing points of view too. Cody's idea is great too, creating assignments that ask students to lead discussions. Perfect. Building in ownership so that you're not the only one standing up there talking and facilitating. Thank you for sharing that, Kim. Really appreciate it. Cody also said he creates assignments that ask students to serve as co-leaders for the upper level courses. So, I mean, these are some really great ideas. Yeah, like Julie said, finding out what they're interested in and using it in class, which kind of goes back to, the tobacco cessation and how can you get these people to stop smoking? What's gonna really resonate with them? What matters to them? And, what matters to us as professors and teachers might not always matter to them as much. So we kind of have to try to walk a mile in their shoes, so to speak, and kind of look at it from their point of view, like what's going to be relevant to them, and then how can I, integrate that into my lesson so that it's so that it really resonates with them. Dan suggested providing thorough, constructive feedback. Yeah, and I can't stress that enough either. Students are always asking for feedback, and it's challenging for us to spend so much time looking at papers and written documents. It's hard sometimes, but most students really are looking for that feedback so that they can improve their performance. These are all really great ideas, super ideas. So somebody had mentioned too earlier active listening, and I'm sorry, I can't remember who wrote that in the chat box, but if you could just, whoever wrote that, if you could just tell me a little bit more about what you meant by thank you, Cody, by active listening. I mean, I think I understand what you're saying, but can you just talk a little bit more about that, or kind of maybe what the challenges are that you've seen around active listening in your class? That would be really helpful. I know that in the conference that I presented at a few months ago, a lot of the comments were that how do we get students to stop texting and using their phones in class, and I don't know if that's a part of it. Cody indicated he does a communication workshop. He goes over basic ideas around active listening and how it aids communication. Sorry, I don't have a mic. No, that's okay. Okay, so when I think of active listening, unfortunately, I think a lot of times where students come in and they're distracted, and a lot of times they're distracted by their phones. So I kind of have a hard line on it. I tell them to just take their phones right off the desk, put it away. Same with their laptops. But I'd be interested in hearing other people's comments too about not only any issues you might have with distractions, because now a lot of students have the Apple Watch, where they could look right on their watch to see if they have text messages or anything like that. I'd be very interested in hearing about anybody's strategies around that, because technology is always changing, and unfortunately students are always kind of finding other ways to do what they want to do within the classroom, even though it might not always be appropriate. But does anybody else want to share what their policies are or guidelines are in their classrooms around phones or Apple iWatches? I'd be really interested in hearing that. And to kind of piggyback off that, something else that another person came up with was, how do we stop students from being so concerned about their grade and points? I mean, that could be a double-edged sword, because sometimes that's helpful, because in my classes they actually get points for participation. So if they participate more, they get more points. If they don't participate at all, they're going to get less points. But how have some of you handled that within your classes, where students are so concerned about getting good grades? That's their biggest concern. They're just obsessed with the point system, and you sometimes think, well, are they really taking in all the information and knowledge that they should? I like both what Julie and what Cody said. Julie has the students, I'm assuming, put their phones on vibrate. I usually give my students a break too, like a 10-minute break, and I'll say, okay, now's the time that you can check your text messages or make calls. Obviously, if there's a student who has like an emergency or a family member that's very sick and needs to kind of pay attention to their phone, that's fine. And I've had students come up to me and say that, like, so-and-so's in the hospital, is it okay if I keep my phone out on my desk? And that's really acceptable, of course. And then Cody was saying that he asks students to self-assess 40% of their participation grades. So Cody, is that they kind of, so they do a self-reflection on that? Like, do they actually score themselves on that? Because that sounds actually like a really good idea. Ways to self-evaluate their own participation. Okay. Yes, and Alan says some faculty let them use their phones for in-class research and other learning tasks. And I think that's good. I tend not to do that as much just because I get nervous, and this is just me. I get nervous about, okay, well, are they really going to be using their phones for what they're supposed to be? And there's really no way for me to kind of watch that, but that might just be a matter of me showing that level of trust for students to do that. Okay, thanks for sharing that, Cody. Do you have any, if you have any documents or any sort of, you know, information that you could share with us for that self-reflection on participation, that would be wonderful. That's completely up to you, but that would be so appreciated. Yeah, I've done the clicker method too. Ramona added a clicker method to answer polls is always fun, but yeah, that can only go so far. Thank you, Cody. I appreciate that. Another thing that was mentioned was somebody had mentioned fear of failure, and again, I apologize. I'm not sure who mentioned that, but I do have, you know, a lot of the students that I teach are like pre-med students, so their grades are very important, so they do have a fear of failure. And I'm not really sure if that was kind of the same thing that whoever had mentioned it was talking about, but I would love to open that up for people as well, fear of failure and how you might have dealt with that within the classroom. A lot of times with my assignments, I will set up assignments so that they give me a first draft, I give them feedback, and they incorporate feedback into that assignment. So then it becomes a better piece of work that they have done. And that to me sets them up for success. That takes more time on my part, of course, but and that might not be feasible if you have really large classes, but I usually have 20, 25 students in most of my classes, so I can make that work, and I have found that that's been really helpful for students. If they have to do something written, for one of my classes, I have a case analysis, and so they hand in their first draft to me, and it's got to be almost a finished draft. Then I provide them feedback, then they give me their finished product. And inevitably, they're going to do a lot better when they incorporate my feedback. So that sometimes helps around fear of failure. But if anybody else has any ideas on that topic, I would love to hear about it. All of us would love to hear about it, I'm sure. You guys are sharing some great ideas. Thank you so much. Yeah, these are all wonderful ideas about feedback and self-reflection, having clear rubrics and a consistent message. These are all wonderful. I mean, I'm not sure you guys need me to do this, this presentation. It sounds like many of you already have really good tools in your toolkit to deal with a lot of this stuff. I think really at this point, thank you everybody for sharing so much. If, are there questions either for myself or for all of us that anybody wants to throw out there? There's been so many wonderful suggestions from all of you that I think that um, general questions to all of us could certainly help, you know, us to answer some of these questions. Obviously, it's just not me, but you all have a lot of experience too that could be helpful. So are there things that haven't really been discussed too much, or challenges that you wanted to talk about that we could take on for the next few minutes? I'm just going to forward my slides here. We've already talked about the challenges and then talking about some possible solutions. I also wanted to just put out there that feel free to contact me if you have additional questions, or if you want to share information with me. I'm always open for that. I'm always looking to improve my teaching as well. And it sounds like you guys have some great ideas and great experience. Thanks everybody for sharing part of your Valentine's Day with me. Happy Valentine's Day. And thank you so much. You guys have been great. You have so many good ideas. I really appreciate all the input and the feedback.
Smiley, I appreciate you sharing all this with us too and encouraging a good discussion. I don't know about that go blue part.
That might get to you, Bob. It's there just for you. Thank you so much.
See, Cody asked, are the chats available? They are. The way Zoom does it, it sends the chats as a separate file. If you really want one, let me know. I'll send you the file. I'll be glad to do it. Well, this is the last session for this year's conference. I really thank all of you for participating. Had some great presenters, had some awesome participants, and gee, let's do it again next year. So thank you all. Hey, take the next 2 days off, okay?